Hello, Professor. My persuasive speech is about mass consumerism and the impact that mass consumerism will have if it keeps up. This speech is an attempt to convince people to consume less goods to create a better future. Mass consumption of goods negatively impacts the environment in a variety of ways that include massive amounts of plastic in the environment, depletion of Earth's finite natural resources. Also, mass consumerism alters people's motivations by making them more focused on obtaining material goods instead of personal connections. And lastly, little is known about the future impact of mass consumerism, which is arguably the most unsettling aspect about it. If nothing is done to reform mass consumer culture, it could be a problem that future generations have to solve. The first point I want to mention, or consequence of mass consumer culture, is decreased happiness. The consumer culture has created a society based in competitive consumerism that has been seamlessly ingrained in society. It has been firmly entrenched into their people's values and how people think. In the book Affluenza by John DeGraff, he explains the trouble with being consumers is that they have no duties or responsibilities or obligations to their fellow consumers. Citizens do. They have the obligation to care about their fellow citizens. This sentiment illustrates the problem with the culture of competitive consumerism that preaches outdo thy neighbor instead of love thy neighbor. Secondly, our consumption habits demand more debt and longer work hours, which in turn reduce social connections, a central foundation of happiness. This means that mass consumerism has direct connection to the increased working hours seen over the since the Industrial Revolution. Lastly, because people are working more and buying more, this makes people prone to less meaningful social interaction. People who actively pursue social ideas end up being more satisfied. This illustrates that American consumers need to increase the amount they interact with each other outside of a working environment, and they can do so by chasing fewer items and more substantive human interaction. Next, the environmental issues that mass consumerism has created far exceed anything that could have ever been predicted. First of all, the garbage in the oceans is alarming. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, the total plastic content in the oceans exceeds 157 million tons, equal to 63% of all the plastic made in the world in 2011. Secondly, exploitation of natural resources has caused the dilution of Earth's finite natural resources. This indicates that the demand for natural resources has forced people to tap into Earth's natural resources too many times. Now the Earth is responding by producing weaker, less concentrated materials. Lastly, garbage that is washed into the ocean is eventually broken down into little plastic pieces called nurdles. These bits of plastic are eaten by tiny fish, which creates a phenomenon known as biomagnification. Biomagnification is the increasing concentration of a substance, in this case plastic, in the tissues of organisms at successively higher levels in the food chain. This means that plastic from the ocean's food chains will eventually make its way into humans. Finally, the unknown consequences of mass consumerism are perhaps the scariest. The world economy that mass consumerism has created is one that is both prone to recession and wasteful. When people overconsume, it creates an economy where the foundation is mass consumption. The rate at which people are consuming the Earth's natural resources is unsustainable, and one must ask the question, what do people do when our resources run out? In an economic system that produces consumer goods as cheap as the free market, the current state of production could lead to overproduction of goods, which was a contributing factor to the Great Depression. All it will take is one economic downturn for people to slow down the purchase of consumer goods. Mass consumerism is impacting the planet due to the many consequences of the mass consumer society that includes societal, economic, environmental, and future implications. It's become obvious that change is needed to lessen the future impact of mass consumerism. Change will not happen immediately, and all it will take is a few minor alterations to consumer goods and the economy. When that occurs, humanity will be better off and will prosper for the foreseeable future. This, of course, exhibits the need for this generation of people to set a foundation of moderation so that future generations can live healthier, less stressful lives. In a perfect world, this generation of people will set an example for the future generation to follow and adapt. Thank you.